My student's dad made his 11-year-old son stay awake 22 hours a day to maximize his potential until the boy collapsed at my piano lessons. When I got CPS involved, the dad retaliated with lawsuits and harassment that cost me everything, but when he kidnapped his son during our legal battle, I had already documented enough to send him away for over a decade. The anti-sleep movement might be one of the most twisted forms of child abuse I've ever witnessed. I didn't know about it until Jake started falling asleep at the piano. Jake was one of my private piano students, and from the moment he showed up for his first lesson that September, something was off. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken, and his hands trembled as he placed them on the keys. He was 11 years old and had transferred from another teacher across town. His dad said they wanted someone who could push Jake to excellence. During that first lesson, Jake kept nodding off between songs. His head would drop forward and jerk back up when his hands slipped off the keys. I figured he was just another overscheduled kid with too many activities. I suggested we move his 4 p.m. slot to earlier in the day, but his dad insisted this was the only time that worked with Jake's optimization schedule. By the third week, Jake was falling asleep while actively playing, not just during the talking parts, but mid-song. His fingers would slow down and eventually stop moving while his eyes closed. One time he fell asleep so deeply that he slumped forward and his forehead hit the keys, creating a jarring chord that didn't wake him. I had to shake his shoulder to bring him back. I tried everything to keep him engaged. I let him pick fun songs instead of classical pieces. I incorporated movement exercises and music games. I even started keeping candy on the piano to give him sugar boosts. Nothing worked. If anything, he got worse as the weeks went on. His playing deteriorated because he couldn't focus long enough to practice at home. By October, I was seriously concerned. Jake was talented and had obviously been well trained by his previous teacher, but now he couldn't play pieces he'd mastered months ago. His coordination was shot. He'd mix up his left and right hands or forget what key we were in. Sometimes he'd stare at the sheet music like he'd never seen notes before. I knew I had to talk to someone, but piano teachers don't have the same reporting structures as school teachers. I decided to approach it carefully with Jake first. After a particularly rough lesson where he dozed off 4 times in 30 minutes, I sat next to him on the bench. I asked him gently if he was okay and whether he was getting enough sleep at night. Jake perked up like I'd said a magic word and said, "I'm doing the 2-hour program Dad found. I'm almost adjusted." My hands went cold. When I asked him to explain, he told me his father had discovered something online about how sleep was a scam invented to keep people average. CEOs and geniuses only needed 2 hours of sleep once they trained their bodies. Jake was in month 3 of the program, down from 8 hours to just 2 hours from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. My stomach churned as Jake kept explaining. His dad had removed his bed and installed bright lights that stayed on all night. If Jake tried to lie down outside his sleep window, alarms would go off. He took cold showers every 2 hours to stay awake and did push-ups between piano practice sessions at home. His dad tracked everything in a spreadsheet and posted updates in an online forum for parents, maximizing their children's potential. I cut the lesson short and called his dad to pick him up early, saying Jake seemed sick. Then I sat in my car Googling what to do. Private music teachers are mandated reporters in my state, but I'd never had to make that call before. I finally called child services and explained everything Jake had told me. The next week, Jake didn't show up for his lesson. His dad left me a voicemail saying they were taking a break from distractions, while Jake pushed through something called an adaptation phase. He sounded manic, talking about breakthrough moments and evolution. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to the social worker handling the case. I found out later that child services had visited their home that same week. They found Jake's room converted into what his father called a productivity pod. Motion sensors, cameras, and alarms everywhere. No furniture except a standing desk. The walls were covered in charts tracking Jake's sleep, productivity metrics, and awakeness scores. The father had shown them his online community of thousands of parents doing the same thing to their kids. The social worker told me Jake had been immediately removed and placed with his aunt. Medical exams showed severe sleep deprivation effects, including hallucinations, stunted growth, and cognitive impairment. The father was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation, but insisted he was trying to give his son advantages in a competitive world. I thought I had done the right thing, but apparently not, because it wasn't long before his dad showed me just how effing psycho some parents really are. 3 weeks passed before I heard anything. Then one afternoon, Jake's father appeared at my studio during another student's lesson. He stood in the doorway of my teaching room, phone in hand, recording everything. My student, a 7-year-old girl, froze mid-scale. Her mother jumped up from the waiting area chair. I kept my voice steady and asked him to leave. He stepped back into the hallway but kept filming through the glass door. My hands shook as I continued the lesson, trying to act normal for my student's sake. Her mother gathered their things and hurried her daughter out early, shooting nervous glances at Jake's father as they passed. The moment they left, I locked the studio door and called 911. By the time police arrived, he was gone. The officer took my statement but explained that standing in a public hallway wasn't illegal. He suggested I get a restraining order. That night, my phone buzzed with notifications. Jake's father had posted the video in his online community with the caption, "The woman who destroyed my family teaching other people's children." The comment section exploded. Hundreds of parents from his anti-sleep forum called me a kidnapper, a family destroyer, an enemy of human advancement. They found my studio's Facebook page and flooded it with 1-star reviews. The next morning, I discovered he'd done more than post videos. He'd filed a formal complaint with the state board that oversees teaching certifications, claiming I'd made false reports to break up his family. He'd hired a lawyer who specialized in parental rights violations. The letter informed me I was being sued for defamation, interference with parental custody, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My studio owner called me into his office that afternoon. He showed me printouts of the reviews, the threats, the photos of my car that someone had had posted online. Parents were canceling lessons. 3 families had already switched to other teachers. He gave me 30 days to resolve the situation or find a new place to teach. I tried to focus on my remaining students, but the harassment escalated. Someone signed my phone number up for hundreds of spam calls. My car tires were deflated twice in 1 week. Anonymous packages arrived at the studio containing sleep deprivation research papers with threatening notes attached. Through all this, I kept thinking about Jake. The social worker couldn't share details due to confidentiality, but she mentioned he was adjusting to a normal sleep schedule with his aunt. At least he was safe. That's what mattered. Then Jake's father got creative. He started showing up at my other students' recitals, sitting in the back row with his phone out. He'd follow me to the grocery store, always staying just far enough away to avoid harassment charges. He joined the same gym I went to and would work out on machines near mine, never speaking but always watching. I changed my routine, stopped going to the gym, had groceries delivered, varied my routes to work, but he always found ways to remind me he was there. A note on my windshield, a photo of me at a coffee shop posted in his forum, reviews on every platform mentioning my name. The legal bills started piling up. My lawyer said the defamation suit was baseless, but would still cost thousands to defend. The state board investigation required documentation, statements, formal responses. I spent nights gathering evidence instead of preparing lessons. My remaining students noticed. Their parents noticed. Everyone noticed the dark circles under my eyes, the way I jumped when the door opened, how I'd lost 15 pounds in a month. One evening, while teaching a teenage student, we heard shouting outside. Jake's father stood in the parking lot with a megaphone, ranting about parental rights and the conspiracy against excellence. Other tenants in the building came out to see what was happening. Someone called the police again. This time they arrested him for disturbing the peace, but he posted bail within hours. His online community rallied around him. They created a fund for his legal fees. They organized email campaigns to the state board. They found photos of me from college and created memes about the piano teacher who hates success. Some drove from other states to protest outside my studio with signs about freedom and parental choice. I started sleeping at the studio some nights, afraid to go home. My car had been keyed. My apartment building's security footage mysteriously corrupted. The police said without proof it was him, they couldn't do anything. The restraining order was denied because the judge said there wasn't enough evidence of direct threats. My lawyer finally had good news. Jake's aunt had agreed to provide a statement about his condition when he arrived at her house. The medical records showed severe damage. Cognitive tests placed him 2 years behind his grade level. He'd lost 20 pounds. He had stress fractures in his feet from the forced standing. His growth plates showed signs of premature closure. But Jake's father had good lawyers too. They argued the medical issues were from the trauma of being removed from his loving home. They presented testimonials from his online community about children who'd thrived on reduced sleep. They'd found a psychologist willing to testify that sleep deprivation could be beneficial in controlled circumstances. The state board scheduled a hearing. I had to prove I'd made the report in good faith, that I'd had reasonable suspicion of abuse. Jake's father would be there with his lawyer, his supporters, his twisted version of events. The week before the hearing, something changed. The harassment stopped abruptly. No more packages, no more sightings, no more online posts. My lawyer said it was probably strategic, that his counsel had advised him to appear reasonable before the board, but I knew better. He was planning something bigger. The morning of the hearing, I arrived early to prepare with my lawyer. The building was modern, all glass and clean lines. We set up in a small conference room, organizing medical records, my teaching credentials, the saved voicemail where Jake's father sounded unhinged. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. Against my lawyer's advice, I answered. Jake's aunt was crying. She'd gone to wake Jake for school and found his window open, his bed empty. There was a note in Jake's handwriting saying he missed his dad and was going home, but she knew Jake couldn't have written it. His hands still shook too much from the neurological damage. Someone had helped him. Someone had taken him. The hearing was postponed as police issued an Amber Alert, but I knew where Jake was. His father had posted a photo an hour earlier in a private forum my lawyer had gained access to through Discovery. The caption read, "Reunited and beginning phase 2 of optimization. Location secure. The revolution continues." The photo showed Jake standing next to some kind of medical equipment, electrodes attached to his temples. His eyes were glazed, unfocused. Behind him, a banner read, "Sleep is the enemy of greatness." My hands trembled as I showed the photo to the police. They traced the IP address to a rental property 2 states away. By the time they arrived, it was empty except for more equipment and charts showing phase 2 involved electric shocks to prevent REM sleep. Jake was found 12 hours later at a rest stop, abandoned and unconscious. His father was arrested trying to cross into Canada. The online community scattered, their forums shut down, their leader in custody. But the damage was done. Jake would need years of therapy, special education, medical treatment. His growth was permanently stunted. His piano days were over. The hands that once played Mozart could barely hold a pencil. I testified at the criminal trial, faced Jake's father as he ranted about persecution and the suppression of human evolution, watched as he was sentenced to 15 years for kidnapping and aggravated child abuse, heard him scream that I'd destroyed the future of humanity. The state board cleared me of all charges. My studio owner apologized and offered me a better lease. Parents who'd left came back. New students signed up, drawn by the publicity. But I couldn't forget Jake's empty eyes in that final photo. Couldn't stop thinking about the other children in that online community whose parents still believed sleep was a scam. Couldn't shake the feeling that I'd won the battle but lost the war. Some nights I dream about Jake playing piano again. His hands are steady, his eyes bright. He finishes a perfect sonata and turns to smile at me. Then I wake up and remember that some damage can't be undone. Some children can't be saved. Some parents will always choose ideology over love. I still teach piano, still watch for warning signs, still still make reports when necessary. But now I know the cost of speaking up, the price of doing what's right, the weight of a child's future in your hands. Jake's aunt sends updates sometimes. He's learning to write again. He sleeps 10 hours a night and wakes up screaming. He doesn't remember much about music anymore, but sometimes his fingers move like they're searching for keys that aren't there. His father still writes from prison, not to Jake or his aunt, but to me. Long letters about how I stole his son's potential, how I condemned Jake to mediocrity, how history will vindicate him. I don't read them anymore, just forward them to the prosecutor in case they're needed for the parole hearings. The anti-sleep movement found new leaders, new forums, new children to torture. They're more careful now, more hidden. They learned from Jake's father's mistakes, but they're still out there, still pushing their children past breaking points in pursuit of impossible dreams. And I'm still here, teaching scales and sonatas, watching for tired eyes and trembling hands, because someone has to. Someone has to see. Someone has to speak up, even when it costs everything, even when the parents are monsters, even when saving one child means declaring war on an entire movement. That's what I learned from Jake, that sometimes the most dangerous abuse comes wrapped in good intentions. That love can be twisted into torture by parents who've forgotten their children are human. That speaking up isn't just about one child, but about all the ones who come after. So I teach, I watch, I report. And I remember Jake, the boy who fell asleep at the piano and woke up a revolution. I kept teaching, but everything had changed. The victory felt hollow when Jake's father started volunteering at his old elementary school. The principal called me personally to explain that without active restraining orders, they couldn't deny a parent with no criminal record from participating in school activities. My hands clenched around the phone as she described how he'd passed all background checks and attended the mandatory training sessions. The first time I saw him wearing that orange volunteer vest, my stomach dropped. He stood at the crosswalk during morning drop-off, helping children cross safely while their parents waved gratefully. His smile never wavered when our eyes met across the parking lot. He simply adjusted his volunteer badge and continued directing traffic. Jake's aunt called me that afternoon, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. The school had notified her about the situation, assuring her that Jake's father would never have unsupervised access to students. But we both knew that wasn't the point. He'd found a way back into Jake's world, and the system that was supposed to protect children had handed him the keys. I started documenting everything, every sighting, every interaction, every post in the online forums my lawyer had given me access to. The community had regrouped on encrypted platforms, but some members still use the old sites. Jake's father had become a hero to them, a martyr for the cause. They shared strategies for regaining access to their children, templates for volunteer applications, scripts for appearing reformed. The forum posts revealed a coordinated effort. Parents across the country were following the same playbook. Volunteer at schools, document their children's struggles without them, build cases for reunification. They called it the Custody Recovery Protocol and treated it like a military operation. Phase 1 was establishing presence. Phase 2 was demonstrating stability. Phase 3 was proving the current guardians were failing. My lawyer reviewed the posts and shook her head. Everything they were doing was legal. Manipulative and calculated, but legal. The forums even had sections on which phrases to avoid, which emotions to display, how to make authorities question their initial decisions. Jake's father had been studying for months. I watched him at school events, always maintaining appropriate distance, always following the rules. He helped set up science fair displays and cleaned up after assemblies. Other parents started to know him, to like him. I heard whispers in the pickup line about how dedicated he was, how sad it was that he couldn't see his son. The narrative was shifting, and I felt powerless to stop it. Jake's therapist called an emergency meeting. During their last session, Jake had mentioned seeing his father at school and feeling confused. Part of him was scared, but part of him missed his dad. The therapist explained this was normal, that children often love their abusers despite the harm done, but Jake's father was using this natural attachment to his advantage. The guardian ad litem assigned to review the case met with both sides. I sat in my lawyer's office as she questioned my involvement, my motivations, my relationship with Jake. She pointed out that I profited from teaching him, that I had no formal training in identifying abuse, that my actions had caused significant disruption to the family. My lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. Jake's father presented himself as a changed man. He'd completed parenting classes, attended therapy, joined support groups for parents who'd made mistakes. He spoke eloquently about missing his son, about learning from his errors, about wanting to rebuild their relationship slowly and carefully. He never mentioned the sleep program directly, only acknowledged pushing Jake too hard academically. I discovered he'd been coaching other parents through their custody battles when one of them approached me at the grocery store. She recognized me from photos in the forums and thanked me for inspiring their movement. Her eyes gleamed with fervor as she explained how my actions had taught them to be more careful, more strategic. They wouldn't make the same mistakes Jake's father had made. My credit card started maxing out from legal fees. The studio owner grew increasingly frustrated with the ongoing drama. Parents whispered when I entered the waiting room, and some pulled their children from my schedule. My reputation as a teacher was becoming overshadowed by my reputation as the woman who'd destroyed a family. Jake's aunt struggled to balance work and guardianship. Her employer had been understanding at first, but the constant court dates and therapy appointments were taking a toll. She'd used up her paid leave and was dipping into unpaid time. Jake's father's lawyer noted every absence, every late pickup, every sign that the current arrangement was unsustainable. I found myself checking the forums obsessively, looking for clues about their next moves. The community had developed a sophisticated understanding of family court psychology. They shared research about parental alienation, coached each other on presenting evidence, celebrated small victories. Jake's father posted updates in code, but I learned to decipher them. The school's spring concert approached, and Jake was scheduled to perform a simple piece. pace. His playing had improved since starting regular sleep, though he'd never reach his former level. I worked with him weekly, rebuilding basic skills, celebrating small victories. He smiled more now, laughed sometimes. The healing was slow, but real. 3 days before the concert, Jake's father signed up to help with setup. The volunteer coordinator approved it, seeing no conflict since Jake wouldn't arrive until after the preparation was complete. But I knew better. This was about presence, about being in the space where Jake would perform, about leaving his mark. I arrived early that day to find him arranging chairs in perfect rows. Other parent volunteers chatted with him casually, unaware of the history. He worked efficiently, helpfully, never stepping out of line. But I noticed how he lingered near the piano, how his fingers traced the edge of the bench where Jake would sit. The concert itself became a test of wills. Jake's father sat in the back row, recording openly. The school couldn't stop him from attending a public event, and his volunteer status gave him additional credibility. Jake froze when he saw him, his hands hovering over the keys. I watched from the side, wanting to intervene but knowing any action would be twisted against me. Jake managed to play his piece, though his hands shook and he missed several notes. His father's expression never changed, but I saw him type something on his phone. Within minutes, forum posts appeared analyzing Jake's performance, comparing it to videos from before the removal, arguing that the trauma of separation had damaged his musical ability. The Guardian ad litem attended the concert and witnessed the interaction. Her report noted Jake's obvious distress but also his father's appropriate behavior. She recommended supervised visitation, arguing that Jake needed to process his feelings about his father in a controlled environment. My lawyer warned me this was the first step toward expanded access. I started making mistakes. The exhaustion and stress affected my teaching, and I snapped at a student who wouldn't focus. The parent complained to the studio owner, who gave me an official warning. Jake's father somehow learned about the incident and filed it away as evidence of my instability. My best friend stopped returning my calls after her husband's employer threatened their health insurance. Jake's father worked in HR for one of the largest companies in town, and his reach extended further than I'd realized. People who might have supported me stayed silent out of fear for their own families. The supervised visitation began at a neutral facility. Jake's aunt drove him there every Saturday while I waited anxiously for updates. The supervisor's reports were frustratingly neutral, noting that father and son played board games, worked on puzzles, talked about school. No red flags, no concerning behavior, just a man trying to reconnect with his child. Jake started defending aspects of the sleep program during therapy. He mentioned that the structure had helped him focus, that maybe he'd learned some valuable lessons despite the extremity. The therapist recognized this as a coping mechanism, but Jake's father's lawyer seized on it as evidence that the program hadn't been entirely harmful. I found Jake's notebook while organizing sheet music. His aunt had brought it to a lesson, thinking it might contain song ideas. Instead, I discovered pages of documentation from during the sleep program. Jake's handwriting, shaky but determined, describing the lights, the alarms, the exhaustion. But mixed in were notes about wanting to make his father proud, about trying harder to adapt, about feeling like a failure. The entries revealed something I'd missed. Jake hadn't been a passive victim. He'd been an active participant, pushing himself to meet his father's expectations, internalizing the belief that sleep was weakness. The abuse was more insidious than physical force. It was psychological manipulation that made Jake complicit in his own suffering. I photographed every page before Jake's father's lawyer filed a motion to seal all evidence. The photos became crucial when the lawyer argued that Jake's willing participation proved the program wasn't abusive. My lawyer countered that children can't consent to harmful treatment, but the narrative was becoming muddled. Jake's paternal grandparents emerged from years of estrangement to support their son. They testified about their own strict parenting methods, about raising successful children through discipline and high expectations. They offered to provide housing and supervision if Jake's father regained custody, presenting a united family front that made Jake's aunt look isolated. The financial strain forced me to take on extra students, teaching late into the evenings, but Jake's father used this against me too, suggesting I was too busy to properly monitor Jake's well-being. Every move I made to survive the situation became ammunition for the other side. I started recognizing the tactics Jake's father had used on his son. The way he made opposition seem unreasonable, the way he presented extreme positions as logical evolution, the way he isolated targets from support systems. I was experiencing a version of what Jake had endured, and it gave me new understanding of how insidious the abuse had been. The school's volunteer coordinator began questioning Jake's father's intense interest in certain students' schedules. She noticed him taking photos of bulletin boards, asking detailed questions about children with special needs, showing particular attention to kids who seemed tired. Her concerns led to a review of his volunteer status. But Jake's father was prepared. He presented documentation of his completed training, glowing references from other volunteers, a log of his helpful contributions. He framed the coordinator's concerns as discrimination against a father trying to stay involved in education, despite being separated from his son. The school board sided with him. I made the difficult decision to share Jake's private conversations from our lessons. The trust we'd built felt sacred, and breaking it went against every instinct I had as a teacher. But protecting his body had to take precedence over protecting his feelings. I documented every mention of exhaustion, fear, and confusion from our months together. My old persona as the supportive, nurturing teacher died completely. In its place emerged someone harder, more strategic. I learned to document without emotion, to present facts without interpretation, to anticipate countermoves. The forums had taught Jake's father to be calculating, and I had to match that energy. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jake's father's new girlfriend mentioned during a school event that he'd been researching biphasic sleep patterns for her children. She thought it showed how dedicated he was to child development. I managed to record part of her enthusiastic explanation before she realized who I was. The supervised visitation reports showed subtle changes. Jake was beginning to relax around his father, even showing affection. The supervisor noted this as positive progress, but I recognized the pattern from the notebook entries. Jake adapting, trying to please, internalizing blame for the conflict. The cycle was beginning again. A minor victory came when the judge ordered expanded evaluation of all parties. Jake's father would have to undergo comprehensive psychological testing, not just the basic assessment he'd completed. My lawyer hoped this would reveal his inability to recognize the harm he'd caused, his continued belief in the sleep restriction ideology. But victories felt hollow when I saw their cost. Jake had to testify about specific incidents, reliving trauma in clinical detail. His aunt missed a crucial work presentation to attend court, jeopardizing her annual review. I lost 3 more students in a week as anonymous reviews painted me as unstable and obsessed. The Music Teachers Association in our area split over supporting me. Some saw me as a hero who'd protected a child. Others viewed me as someone who'd overstepped boundaries and destroyed a family. The division played out in professional forums and local events, creating tension that affected everyone. I learned that family court's primary goal was reunification whenever possible. The legal standard wasn't preventing all harm, but determining whether a parent posed an imminent threat. Jake's father's lawyers argued successfully that his mistakes had been well-intentioned, that he'd learned from them, that denying access would cause its own trauma. The strategy sessions with my lawyer revealed how much the system favored biological parents. We needed specific evidence of ongoing danger, not past harm. Jake's father's completion of parenting classes, his therapy attendance, his stable employment all worked in his favor. My status as a concerned teacher carried less weight with each hearing. Jake's testimony preparation was heartbreaking. He still loved his father, still wanted to make him proud. When asked about the sleep program, he focused on trying harder, on letting his father down, on wishing he'd been stronger. The internalized shame was so deep that even months of therapy hadn't fully addressed it. The forums revealed Jake's father's true intentions when someone leaked screenshots from a private chat. He'd never stopped believing in sleep restriction, only learned to hide it better. The posts detailed plans for phase 2 once he regained access, involving gradual reintroduction of optimization techniques that would be harder to detect. These posts became crucial evidence, showing a pattern of deception and continued danger. But Jake's father's lawyer argued they were taken out of context, that they represented venting rather than actual plans. The judge ordered authentication by a digital forensics expert, delaying proceedings further. My life narrowed to teaching, documenting, and preparing for court. Friends stopped inviting me to gatherings, tired of hearing about the case. My family worried about my obsession, suggested I'd done enough, encouraged me to step back. But I couldn't abandon Jake, not when I knew what awaited him. The school volunteer position gave Jake's father access to observe other children's behaviors. He compiled data on students who showed signs of fatigue, parents who seemed permissive about bedtimes, families that might be receptive to his ideas. His true purpose became clear when he started hosting parenting optimization workshops at the community center. I attended one secretly, disguised in a baseball cap and sunglasses. The presentation was slick, professional, focusing on helping children reach their potential in a competitive world. He never mentioned extreme sleep restriction directly, but the underlying message was clear. Several parents took his contact information, eager to learn more. The custody evaluation reached its conclusion after months of interviews, observations, and analysis. The evaluator noted Jake's father's genuine love for his son, but also his rigid thinking patterns and inability to fully acknowledge harm caused. The recommendation was continued supervised visitation with gradual expansion, based on Jake's comfort level and therapeutic progress. Neither side was satisfied with this outcome. Jake's father wanted full restoration of his parental rights. I wanted him to have no access at all. Jake's aunt just wanted stability for Jake, who was showing signs of regression as the conflict dragged on. The compromise felt like a defeat for everyone. The financial toll became unbearable. I'd maxed out credit cards, depleted savings, borrowed from family. The studio owner offered to let me teach from home to reduce overhead, but that meant losing access to the professional space that gave me credibility. Every practical decision felt like another step backward. Jake's progress in therapy stalled as court dates approached. He began showing symptoms of anxiety, picking at his fingers during lessons, startling at unexpected sounds. The stability his aunt had worked so hard to create was crumbling under the pressure of ongoing legal battles and the constant presence of his father in the periphery. I realized the war of attrition was working. Jake's father had resources, time, and a support network coaching him through every step. I had determination and truth, but those were proving insufficient against systematic manipulation and legal maneuvering. The system designed to protect children was being used against them. The forum posts I'd collected over months revealed the scope of the movement. Hundreds of parents across the country were following similar patterns, refining their approaches based on shared experiences. Jake's case had become a teaching tool, my actions dissected and analyzed to help others avoid detection. The approaching custody hearing felt like a final battle. Both sides had presented evidence, undergone evaluations, made their arguments. Jake would have to testify in judges' chambers, sharing his perspective on where he wanted to live and how much contact he wanted with his father. The weight of decision was being placed on a traumatized child. I prepared for the hearing by organizing every piece of evidence, every documented incident, every forum post that showed continued danger. My lawyer coached me on remaining calm, presenting facts without emotion, avoiding any appearance of vindictiveness. The truth would have to speak for itself. Jake's father prepared by gathering character witnesses, completing additional parenting courses, and crafting a narrative of redemption and growth. His lawyer would argue that mistakes had been made but lessons had been learned. The past was being reframed framed as misguided love rather than abuse. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Jake's small hands on the piano keys, his exhausted eyes, his desperate attempts to please everyone. I thought about all the other children whose parents were learning from this case, refining their methods, becoming harder to detect. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. Morning came too quickly. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that projected professionalism and stability. The drive to the courthouse felt both endless and too short. Everything I'd fought for over the past months would be decided by one person's interpretation of law and evidence. The courthouse steps were crowded with Jake's father's supporters from the online community. They held signs about parental rights and family unity, presenting a united front that made me look like the outsider. I walked past them with my head high, my lawyer's hand on my elbow, knowing that appearance mattered as much as truth. Inside, the hallway split into two clear camps: Jake's father's family and supporters on one side, Jake's aunt, and a few brave friends on the other. I sat with my lawyer between the groups, feeling the weight of being the catalyst for all this conflict. The bailiff called us in, and the final phase began. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Jake's father sat at the opposite table with his lawyer, hands folded, wearing the same calm expression he'd perfected at school events. His supporters filled the gallery behind him. Jake's aunt sat beside me, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. The judge entered and we all stood. My legs felt unsteady as I watched her review the thick file containing months of documentation. She called Jake's father's lawyer first. He painted a picture of a devoted parent who'd made mistakes but learned from them. The parenting classes, therapy sessions, volunteer work, all demonstrated rehabilitation. He emphasized Jake's father's stable employment, community support, and genuine desire to rebuild his relationship with his son. When my lawyer's turn came, she presented the forum posts methodically. The digital forensics expert authenticated each one, confirming they'd been posted during times Jake's father claimed to be sleeping. The posts about Phase 2 were particularly damning, showing plans to gradually reintroduce sleep restriction once he regained access. But Jake's father's lawyer argued these were theoretical discussions, not concrete plans. Jake's testimony happened in the judge's chambers. We waited in the hallway while he spoke privately with her. Through the door, I could hear his small voice, but not the words. His aunt paced the corridor, checking her phone repeatedly. Her boss had already texted twice about a meeting she was missing. When Jake emerged, his eyes were red. He walked straight to his aunt without looking at his father. The judge called us back in to announce she'd review everything and issue her decision within 2 weeks. 2 more weeks of uncertainty, of Jake's father maintaining his volunteer position, of the community remaining divided. Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of teaching and waiting. Jake's father continued his routine at school, now helping with the end-of-year activities. More parents signed up for his optimization workshops. I documented everything but felt like I was fighting shadows. The decision came on a Tuesday morning. The judge granted Jake's aunt permanent custody with supervised visitation for Jake's father. The visits would occur at a court-approved facility with a trained supervisor present. Jake's father would need to complete additional psychological evaluation and demonstrate sustained recognition of the harm caused before any expansion of access would be considered. But the judge also lifted some restrictions. Jake's father could continue volunteering at school events, though not in Jake's classroom or during his activities. He could maintain his online presence as long as he didn't discuss Jake or promote sleep restriction for minors. The compromise left everyone unsatisfied. Jake's father's reaction was controlled, but I saw his jaw tighten. His lawyer immediately mentioned appeals. The supporters in the gallery murmured their disappointment. Some glared at me as they filed out. I knew the harassment would resume, just more carefully this time. That afternoon, Jake had his regular piano lesson. He played better than he had in months, his fingers finding the keys with growing confidence. When I complimented his progress, he smiled genuinely for the first time since the court proceedings began. We worked on a new piece, something cheerful and age-appropriate, far from the complex compositions his father had once demanded. The studio owner called me in after Jake left. He'd received more complaints from parents uncomfortable with the ongoing situation. 3 more families were switching teachers. He offered to let me continue teaching, but suggested I might want to consider relocating, starting fresh somewhere new. The conversation felt like another defeat. Jake's aunt struggled with the decision too. The supervised visits meant driving Jake across town every Saturday, waiting in a sterile facility while he spent an hour with his father under observation. The first visit was scheduled for the following weekend. She asked if I thought she was doing the right thing. I had no good answer. The online forums exploded with analysis of the ruling. Jake's father became a symbol of perseverance for the movement. They dissected every word of the judge's decision, looking for loopholes and precedents. New strategies emerged for working within the system while maintaining their beliefs. The sleep restriction movement wasn't dying. It was evolving. I attended Jake's end-of-year school concert, sitting far from where his father filmed from the back row. Jake played his piece without freezing this time, though his hands still trembled slightly. His aunt beamed with pride. His father's expression remained unreadable behind his phone screen. The supervised visits began with Jake returning exhausted and confused. The supervisor's reports noted appropriate interactions, but also Jake's anxiety. His father used the time to discuss school, hobbies, anything except sleep. But Jake told his therapist his father kept mentioning how proud he was of Jake's improved focus since the separation. My financial situation forced difficult decisions. I sold my car and started taking the bus. I moved to a smaller apartment. I took on adult students in the evenings to supplement income. Every sacrifice felt like Jake's father winning another small victory. The school's volunteer coordinator finally succeeded in limiting Jake's father's involvement after documenting his pattern of gathering information about other students. He could no longer access areas where student information was displayed, but he simply shifted tactics, befriending parents directly at pickup and drop-off times. Jake's progress in therapy remained slow. He'd internalized so much guilt about the family separation that he sometimes asked his aunt if he could have tried harder to adapt to the sleep program. These moments broke her heart. She'd given up career advancement opportunities to provide stability, and now Jake wondered if it had been necessary. I discovered Jake's father had started a new relationship with a woman who had 3 young children. She attended his workshops and spoke enthusiastically about implementing moderate optimization techniques with her kids. When I reported this to Child Services, they said without specific evidence of harm, they couldn't intervene in legal parenting choices. The Music Teacher Association formally voted to remain neutral in situations involving custody disputes. My situation had created too much division. I understood their position but felt abandoned by my professional community. Teaching became a solitary profession, focused solely on the students in front of me. Jake's aunt's employer finally lost patience with her absences. They offered her a choice: accept a demotion with flexible hours or maintain her position with strict attendance requirements. She chose the demotion, another sacrifice for Jake's stability. Jake's father's lawyer noted this career instability in their ongoing documentation. 6 months after the initial ruling, Jake's father petitioned for expanded access. He'd completed additional therapy, maintained appropriate behavior during supervised visits, and gathered letters of support from community members. His lawyer argued that the restricted access was harming Jake's relationship with his father. The hearing felt like déjà vu. The same arguments, the same evidence, the same fundamental disagreement about what constituted Jake's best interests. But this time, Jake was older, more aware of the proceedings. He asked his aunt why his dad couldn't just promise not to do the sleep thing again. The innocence of the question revealed how little he understood about the depth of his father's beliefs. The judge maintained the supervised visitation, but allowed Jake's father to attend Jake's public performances and school events involving all students. It was a minor expansion, but felt like a crack in the dam. Jake's father smiled when the decision was read, already planning his next move. I continued teaching Jake, watching him slowly reclaim his musical ability. He'd never reached the level he might have achieved without the interruption, but he found joy in playing again. Sometimes during lessons, he'd mention something his father said during visits, always framed positively, but revealing continued attempts at influence. The community remained divided. Some parents avoided me at school events, while others thanked me quietly for speaking up. The studio where I taught struggled with the controversy. New students came specifically because of my reputation for protecting children, while others left for the same reason. Jake's father's workshops grew more sophisticated. He'd learned to couch sleep restriction in terms of sleep optimization and efficient rest patterns. He never explicitly promoted extreme restriction, but laid the groundwork for parents to discover those methods on their own. The evolution of his approach made it nearly impossible to intervene. A year after the custody decision, Jake's aunt noticed changes in his sleep patterns. He'd started waking earlier, claiming he didn't need as much sleep anymore. Investigation revealed Jake's father had been giving him books about successful people who slept less during their supervised visits. The supervisor hadn't seen anything inappropriate about educational books. This discovery led to another round of legal battles. Jake's father claimed he was simply encouraging academic interests. The books weren't about sleep restriction specifically, just biographies that happened to mention sleep habits. The judge warned him about indirect influence but couldn't prove intentional harm. Jake's confusion deepened. He loved his father but feared disappointing him. He felt safe with his aunt but guilty about the family division. Therapy helped but couldn't erase the fundamental conflict between his need for both safety and his father's approval. I made peace with my reduced circumstances. Teaching fewer students meant more attention for each one. Financial strain was constant but manageable. The legal battles had taught me to document everything, recognize warning signs earlier, speak up despite consequences. The anti-sleep movement continued evolving, learning from each court case, refining their methods. Jake's father remained a hero in their community, proof that persistence could maintain influence even after setbacks. New parents joined daily, drawn by promises of giving their children advantages in a competitive world. Jake's story became a cautionary tale in child welfare training, though his name was protected. Social workers learned to look for subtle signs of sleep restriction, to ask specific questions about bedtime routines. But for every case caught, dozens likely continued undetected. As Jake entered middle school, the supervised visits continued. His relationship with his father remained complicated, full of love and fear, connection and confusion. His aunt provided stability while managing her own sacrifices. His therapy sessions focused on building identity separate from others' expectations. I still teach piano, still watch for warning signs, still speak up when necessary. The cost was high, but the alternative was unconscionable. Jake plays beautifully now, not at the prodigy level his father once envisioned, but with genuine emotion and personal expression. The forums still exist, encrypted and careful. Jake's father still posts, sharing strategies and encouragement. The movement adapted, survived, evolved, but so did the awareness, the vigilance, the willingness of some to speak up despite personal cost. Some battles don't end with clear victory. Sometimes protection means constant vigilance, small victories, ongoing struggle. Jake is safe, sleeping soundly, playing piano for joy rather than optimization. That has to be enough.